Wow, wow. Author Bobby Nash. How you doing?
I am good. How are you?
I'm blessed. I'm blessed. Thank you very much for honoring our IV.
Oh, my pleasure. I'm happy to be here. Happy to chat with you.
Wow. Welcome to the podcast, The One Student, One Book, One Author Mantra, the Global Reader Circle, the ultimate podcast designed to help make a committed reader out of every global person, especially the global student. I'm so honored, so humbled, and thrilled to have Oti Bobby Nash on the show tonight.
Yeah.
Ata Bobby, you're going to be having fun on the book show. You'll be telling us how you got into this creative lifestyle of being a lifelong learner and when you became an intentional reader, obviously with over 100 books in your name, it should be a room full of books. So I am so privileged to have you share these testimonies and stories with us. Are you ready?
Yes, sir. I started.
Beautiful. So Bobby, you start by telling us about your upbringing and how you were raised. You obviously lucky and privileged to be born in a home where reading was the order of the day. But let's just know about you.
Yeah. I was. I was born in Georgia, here in the United States, right outside of Atlanta. Um, I started out as a reader. My mother liked to read, and
Wow,
so I would see her read often, and every once in a while, I would. She would. This was back in the '70s, and they would have the book clubs where you would order books and they would mail books to you. And she
wow,
used to get books in the mail and she would read them. And then she would also get the Reader's Digest that had a bunch of short stories and things like that. So I read a few of those, but I really got into it when I discovered comic books. And
wow.
I just fell in love. I had watched the Spider-Man cartoon as a kid in reruns, so I knew Spider-Man from cartoons. And we were
Wow.
in a store one day, and we were in the checkout line, and there was a. They used to do the comics where they would put them in like packs of three in like a plastic bag, and so you could see two of them, but you never knew what the middle one was. And
Yeah.
I remember we were in this checkout line, and there's this three-pack of comics, and two of them are Spider-Man comics, and I didn't know Spider-Man was a comic character. I just knew him from the cartoons. So I begged my mother to let me get these. And so she relented and I got this and it ended up having three issues of Spider-Man in this. And I was blown away by how comics were presented, how the art looked, how they were written, and I just
Yeah.
fell in love with them. And so I had this thing in my head was like, I this is what I want to do. I want to do comic books. How do I?
Wow.
And but I didn't know. There was no class or no what. It's like you didn't. So I taught myself how
Wow.
to how to how to draw stories. You very much looking at comics and just, copying it first. Doing it how
Yeah.
they do it, and then you learn things as you go along. And then
Yeah.
as I got older, I met other people that did them, and so you start learning things. And so I just fell in love with telling stories that way,
Yeah.
with what I could do with comics. And but that also made me want to read more to see how other stories were told, which also got me into reading novels and short stories and paperbacks and other things like that. And as a kid, things like Encyclopedia Brown kind of fostered my love of mysteries, and which I still
Wow.
have today. And so stuff like that. So I was like a sponge. I would take it all in, and then I would be like, "Can I do this? I want to do not." And as a kid too, I didn't I didn't know this was a job. It
Wow.
was just something fun to do as a kid. At no
Yeah.
point did I ever think, what, there are people, this is their job. They do this for a living. And
Yeah.
yeah, so I got started, and I So I would learn to tell stories, and then, like with everything else you do in life, the more you do it, the more you learn what works and what doesn't, the more you try things. And most of the time you get better, or or you fall flat on your face and you go, "Oh, that didn't work. Let me try something else." But just the idea of telling stories was just, I loved it. I still do.
Mhm.
All these years later, I still love it. It's so much fun, and oh, excuse me. And
Very
I just love coming up with new and hopefully creative stories to put characters in.
wow, wow.
Yeah.
So with over 100 books in your name, I like to
Mhm.
ask you, when did you become so intentional, like very intentional about wanting to be an author that solves problem for a greater number of people? When did it dawn on you that you had the golden pen in you?
When I was in high school, that was when I started making a concerted effort to learn enough to make writing and drawing comic books my career. Um,
Wow.
that was my plan. It did not work out that way. After I got out of high school, I did some work locally. I did comic strips for a kids magazine, local kids magazine.
Yeah.
Very very kid friendly comic strips, but I would write articles, and I used to interview people for magazines and newspapers and all that kind of stuff. And
Wow.
so it wasn't until, and I did some like local stuff, some little here and there, but it wasn't until 2000, the year 2000, when I sold my first like professional comic script to a publisher. Actually, it wasn't. They hired me to take over scripting a book that had lost the writer that was working on it. And
Yeah.
so it wasn't until 2000 that I was technically became a professional writer. I'd been published locally since 1992, but a lot of that was local stuff. A lot of you don't, you know, like a lot of the stuff I did for the newspaper, there was no money there. I was doing it because I loved it. Um,
Wow.
but so in 2000, I do that, and I had been working on a novel um, for a few years at that point, and it took me about 6 years to sell the novel after I finished it, and
Wow.
I sold my first novel in 2004. It was a suspense thriller called Evil Ways, about an FBI agent chasing a killer, and
Yeah.
um, and so I sold that in 2004, and it came out in 2005, and so at that point, I still do comics, and I still do comics to this day, but
Yeah.
the novels and short stories kind of became the thing I do more of. So yeah,
Wow.
yeah, there's kind of there's a couple of different things. There's different ways you can write. I mean, some people just create their own stuff and do their own thing. Other people do
Yeah.
work for hire. Some people do both, and I'm in that category. I do both. I create my own characters. I create my own worlds, and I have those books. But I also do work for publishers with either the publisher's characters or licensed characters, like where publishers will license a character from a TV show or a movie or stuff like that. Where like I recently wrote Zorro, or the Green Hornet, things like that, where someone else owns the characters, but the publisher has licensed them. So I do work for hire stuff like that as well. So, um, but the bottom line of all of it is there's still that same bit of fun to it that I had when I was a kid, going like, "Ooh, can I create these stories? Can I do this?" And that
Wow.
feeling is still there. Now, I've been doing it a while, so there is a bit of, some of it's tempered by the fact that, you still have to treat it like a job and all that, but that sense of excitement is
Yeah.
there. That sense of wonder is like, I can't believe I get to do this. I can't believe I get to sit around all day and come up with, these type of stories or whatever. Or oh my God, I got to write Zorro. How cool is that? that kind of stuff. So yeah, so that I've been lucky that sense of wonder is still there, because I know sometimes it's easy to lose that when you get into the work of it. Sometimes you kind of lose that. I'm so thankful that I have it. I mean, yeah, I still love what I do. I love writing stories, and I love playing with characters and coming up with what I can, doing things, and it's such a as a career, it's fun too. I mean, I love that, people pay me to write stuff. That's pretty cool. As a kid, I never would have expected that. But I also there's a lot of yeah, there's a lot of secondary value as well. I get to travel.
Yeah.
I do a lot of conventions. So I travel a
Wow.
lot. I do writers conferences. I
Wow.
teach it. I teach at various like centers for the arts or writers conferences on various topics. I get invited to come talk writing, talk publishing. I've made a lot of friends. I've met a lot of very interesting people. Then all of that stem from the fact that I get to do that. This made that happen. So there's a lot of those great benefits to getting out there uh, and it's because writing is a very I'm sure other writers have probably told you this as well. Writing is a very solitary thing. You're by yourself
Wow.
all the time. I
Yeah.
write, I'm in a room by myself with the doors closed, and I usually play music when I'm working, but I'm alone. When you're
Wow.
when you're an actor working on stage, you know, if you
Yeah.
do something right, you hear there's applause. You get that instant feedback.
Yeah.
When I'm writing, I'm in a room by myself. There's no kind of instant feedback or any feedback for a while, especially if you're writing
Yeah.
a novel, which could sometimes take 6 months to write and then another year
Yeah.
to come out. So it may be 2 years after you write something before somebody goes, "Hey, I like that." So
Yeah.
you have to,
Yeah.
yeah, you have to kind of, find things to keep yourself entertained. But it is a wonderful feeling when people say, "Hey, I read this and I liked it." That's
Wow.
always cool.
Wow. Wow. Utter Bobby Nash. I feel so humbled, so honored to have you live on this podcast. And here is one of the big thing about you. For you to be an author of over 100 books, different genres, I like to ask you, which of the books would you say was the breaking point for you, where you think you poured your soul, your heart, and the book you think you've been doing everything possible to take it into the hands of the final consumers? I mean, the readers you wrote it for.
I still think Evil Ways, which was my first published novel, it was not the first
Wow.
one I wrote. It was the second one I wrote. The first one I wrote
Yeah.
was horrible. But 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 that's a lot of times you learn doing that first one and go, okay, this is crap.
Yeah.
I can do it better. But my
Yeah.
Evil Ways was my first published novel, and it's probably the most me of anything I've written because
Wow.
I didn't know what I was doing. So there's a lot of stuff in there that I've since learned from doing this for a while. I wouldn't have done it that way. Now I wouldn't do it that way now. I would do things differently. And not to say that it's bad. It's just I've learned better ways to convey what I was trying to get across. But Evil Ways was a big stepping stone for me as a writer. I had done some comics, and unfortunately, no matter how many comics you've had published, when you talk to a novel publisher and you say I've published comics, they say, okay, that doesn't count. They're not novels. You're a new writer. Which is
Wow.
humbling because you're like, I've been doing this for years. What do you mean I'm a new writer? But but when Evil Ways came out in 2005. It came out in August of 2005, and I had sold it in August of 2004. So I had a year before it came out, and I was working just here and there. It wasn't a lot of work before that, But in 2005, having Evil Ways in my hand made it possible for me to get work for other publishers. Because when you go, your work is your resume, you know. And so
Yeah.
when you talk to publishers, and doing it yourself and self-publishing wasn't quite as readily accepted and available in 2005 like it is today. It was
Yeah.
there, but it wasn't celebrated. You know, it was kind of like,
Yeah.
"Oh, you self-published. You must not be good enough to get hired anywhere else." That was kind of I've heard those kind of comments. So,
Wow.
yeah. So it was never real it never occurred to me to try to self-publish. So I spent those early days doing talking to publishers, trying to get publishers to look at my work, get publishers to hire me. And when you say, "Hey, I'm a writer," the first thing they're going to do is say, "Well, what have you written?" And you start go, "Well, I'm working on my first book, and I don't really have anything out yet." You can see them lose interest. you know,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
when you say, "Hi, I'm Bobby, I'm a writer," and they say, what have you written?" And you put a novel in their hand, you've bought yourself a minute of their time, because if you hand somebody a book, they're going to look at the cover, they're going to flip it
Yeah.
over, they're going to look at the back cover, and they may open it
Yeah.
up and scan a
Yeah.
paragraph or two. So you've bought yourself a minute, but you've also bought yourself a little respectability, because now that publisher or editor or whoever you're talking to, or agent or whatever, they know a few things about you as a creator. And this is very important. It's not always how you write or what you write. The fact that you finished something is very important to publishers and editors. They want to
Wow.
know that if they hire you to do a project, you're going to finish it, because
Yeah.
that is a thing that happens with sometimes with publishers. They'll hire someone who will start and then never finish. And
Yeah.
so the fact that you have a book published shows them not only that you can do the work, but that you'll finish the work. And
Yeah.
then that helps with your professionalism a little. They know you're going to do the job. And so those type of things help with your how you present yourself, because you want to, as this is a very creative business, and we are all creative people, but we can't forget the part that's it's still a business. So there are parts of it where you have to go in
Yeah.
treating it like a job, because the people you're pitching your stuff to are treating it like a job. And so,
Yeah.
that business practice of how you how you present yourself, how you talk to people, um, how you present the information is all important. And I found, just for me personally,
Wow.
on
Wow.
the
Wow.
on getting stuff done, thinking of it like a
Yeah.
job helps. Because when I was a kid,
Yeah.
I wrote and drew when I felt like it. It was a hobby. I did it when the muse hit me. Now that it's my
Yeah.
job, I realized that if I wanted this to be my job, I had to treat it like one. So that means,
Yeah.
even though I work at home, I go into my office and I work
Yeah.
as if I was going to a day job. I go to
Yeah.
the office. These are my office hours. So those kind of
Yeah.
things kind of help me to be productive. I work every day, whether I feel like it or not. I go into the office and work. So yeah, so those are kind of things that you learn from the doing it of, how to present yourself, how to get the work out. And then once you've put the work in, one, like I said earlier, your work is your resume. So handing
Yeah.
someone a copy of Evil Ways, then they go. So when Evil Ways came out, sorry, I got off a little tangent there. Sorry. When Evil Ways comes out, I was
Yeah.
showing Evil Ways at conventions and to other people and promoting it. That's also a very big part of the job, is promotion and marketing.
Sure.
And others, I would talk to publishers and show them, hey, I've got this novel, and I've done these comics. So now I've got 5 or 6 things I can show people. I've done some
Yeah.
comics. I've got this novel. Hey, I did these things. It's all pretty resume. And they're like, oh, okay. So a couple of publishers read Evil Ways. I gave Evil Ways to a couple of publishers that I was interested in doing stuff with. And
Wow.
they then go, okay, we like this. We think you would be good for this thing we're doing. Would you be interested? And so then you start getting other publishers coming to you going, hey, we're doing, you know, I see you write mystery stuff. Okay, we're doing this mystery anthology. Would you be interested? And so you're it becomes like this one job, one book gets you another book, or one job gets you another job, and you're using that to build your resume and reach out to people. And so Evil Ways for me was the book that really opened those doors for me, because it was the one I was it was the only book I had at the time, the only novel. And so I was showing it to anybody that would listen. And
Wow.
yeah, so that opened doors. And so yeah, so Evil Ways was that was my moment for me. That was, plus it was my first published novel. I remember the day it was dropped off. There was a box of them dropped off on my front porch. And I opened the door and I picked up this box and I opened the box, and you couldn't wipe the smile off my face.
Wow.
It was such a awesome moment. It's like, oh my God, not only is this my book, it's got my name on it in big letters. Oh my God, there's a picture of me on the back cover. It was just,
Wow.
I felt, yeah, it's like, oh my
Wow.
God, I have arrived, you know,
Wow.
and yeah,
Wow.
so that was a cool feeling, and that book, like I said, that book kind of got the ball rolling on me getting other work. And then, like I said, as with your work is your resume. So the more you do, the more people see it, the more people hire you, that kind of thing. So,
Also, Bobby Nash, let's talk about the evil way.
mhm,
I believe that when you wrote the book, The Evil Way, Evil Ways,
mhm,
sorry,
that's okay.
when you wrote that book, you probably was trying to solve a problem. So, what problems were you trying to profile through that right, Evil Ways?
Part of it was to prove that I could do it. That was first,
Beautiful.
because writing a novel, it doesn't seem like a lot until you sit down and you start doing it. Most novels, a standard novel tends to be about 100,000 words, give or take. That doesn't, you look at it and
Yeah.
you look at a book, oh, I can read this, and it's not that bad until you start writing and trying to get to 100,000 words. And then you
Yeah.
realize this is kind of daunting. And
Yeah.
and I had started before that, I had started and stopped multiple times trying to do something, and either lost interest or got discouraged and quit, or the story wasn't working. There was just a lot. So part of it was I wanted to prove to myself I could do it. Um, and I've done that multiple times throughout my career. It's like I c- I want to know, can I do it? And so sometimes we'll do projects to see if I can do it, because sometimes you don't know until you try.
Yeah. You
And so
tried.
yeah, so a lot of it was that. So when I started the novel, I started writing it, and again, like I said earlier, I didn't know what I was doing. So I would run into problems and things like that. So I took a night class. There was a night class at the University of Georgia, and it wasn't for credit or anything. It was just one of those, adult learning things. And it was called, I remember the class was called Murder and Mayhem for Fun and Profit, Creative Writing, whatever, where people were writing murder mysteries and thrillers and things like that. And I was like, so I
Yeah.
signed up and took that class, and we would write, during the week, and then we would bring our stuff into class. We would read it in front of the teacher and the rest of the class. And then the teacher would give us feedback, and then the other students would give us feedback.
Wow.
And I learned a lot doing that. Because that, again, because we said earlier, you write in a room by yourself and you don't get the feedback. Doing the class was awesome, because instantly people would say, I don't understand what you were trying to do there, or that didn't make sense, or oh my God, that was awesome. You know, so you were
Yeah.
getting that instant feedback of, you know, what's working, what's not. Because you don't, as writers, we know what we're trying to say. And sometimes what's in our head does not always make it into what we type. You know,
Yeah.
we're filling in the blanks in our heads. And so doing that class, getting that instant feedback was wonderful because I could hear somebody else explain to me what didn't make sense to them. Not just they didn't. It wasn't just that doesn't make sense to me. It was like, why did this happen? Or wait,
Yeah.
who is that guy? Or I don't know who's talking, or that kind of thing. And so it gave you that feedback to think about instantly, and then you could go back and rework it and see what worked and what didn't. So solving those kind of problems was what Evil Ways helped me with, was learning how to do a chapter, because like I said earlier, I didn't know what I was doing. So I
Yeah.
went in, I remember when I started, I had it in my head that a chapter had to be X number of pages. I don't know
Yeah.
why I thought that. Maybe it's because books I was reading tended to be that many pages. And I was like, it's got to be this. And what I was doing was I was padding the story to reach this arbitrary number I'd put in my head. And so the chapters were longer than they needed to be, and they were losing impact because I was adding all this
Yeah.
unnecessary stuff. And so I
Yeah.
realized, when I realized, ooh, chapters can be as short or as long as I need them to be. That helped. Then suddenly it got a little, the storytelling got a little better. Um, I had to learn things like tenses, and you know, I would have the problem of I'd be talking first person for 1 minute, and then I would jump into third
Yeah.
person, and
Yeah.
yeah. So those are the kind of things that I was those were the problems I was running into, and then learning how to solve them. And the class helped, the feedback helped, just doing it helped. The more you do
Wow.
something, and so yeah, so I solved a few of those problems there. Um, some take longer. I mean, like I said, it's you learn from every project. So when I went into
Yeah.
my second novel, I had learned stuff on this first one. So I go into the second novel, and then I discovered new problems there I needed to work on, or things I need to work on. So with each one, hopefully you're
Yeah.
learning and getting better as you go.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, to Bobby Nash, wow, you have a wonderful story to share. And I must confess that I am so inspired, and I'm sure the audience will be so mesmerized with your story. But here is a point where I have to ask you. It seems you had people always cheering you on to bring on the golden pen out of you. And it also seems that you had done a lot of homework because you talked about the books you were reading to do the evil way. So I'd like you to talk about your favorite authors and how they had substantial influence over your writing. The names.
Oh, oh, okay, okay. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, having that cheerleading section is definitely helpful.
Yeah.
Having people that can kind of help you along is great. I read a lot. I love reading. I read a lot of mysteries and thrillers. These days, I read a lot of like Michael Connolly, who does the Harry Bosch novels, The Lincoln Lawyer. I love his
Wow.
books. Alex Kava, I'm reading her newest one right now. She does the
Wow.
Maggie Odell and the Ryder Creed books, which are all thrillers. Stephen
Wow.
J. Yeah, the late Stephen J. Canal was fantastic. I knew him
Wow.
from writing TV shows, but he also started writing novels later in his career.
Wow.
You know,
Wow. Your bow have it that you are also an actor. Wow.
I'm kind of an actor. I
No, no,
do.
no, you are an actor because even if you're doing something very small, you're not the
Mm,
protagonist. You could be an extra, but
yeah.
you are being on the screen. So how does that feelings? How do you feel? How does it make you see the creative in you? How does it make you see the reader that you have been? How does it make you see your authority as an author being on the screen, no matter how little the time may be?
Yeah. Oh, I love it. I love it. I started out doing. background extra work. I started out doing that. I've done a few things where I have lines too as well. Small parts, yeah, small parts. It's fun. I love it's another form of the creativity. It's
Yeah.
another form of seeing how creativity works
Yeah.
because words on a page, it's a different kind. Like when I write a novel, I'm telling you everything you need to know. When I write a comic book, the artist is helping tell the readers what you need to know. When you're doing a
Yeah.
movie or a TV show, the cameraman, the actors, the other actors, the director, all of us are working together to tell you what you need to know. And so the creativity is there through all of it. It's just done in different ways. And I love it.
Yeah.
I love acting. I try to do it as often as I can. But it's certainly the last few years with, you know, pandemics and other issues.
Yeah.
I haven't done as
Yeah.
much as I would like, but it's fun, and I love doing it. I love it's like playing. It's when I start as a kid when I first started being creative before I was ever thought about writing. My creativity was I would because I was an only child until I was about 9.
Wow.
So I would go outside and play, and I'm by myself. So everything was
Wow.
imagination. And
Yeah.
at first it would be whatever I was watching on TV.
Yeah.
A big one for me as a kid was Star Trek. Star Trek used to be on in the afternoons when I got home from school. And so I'd come home, have my snack, I would watch Star Trek, and then my mother would send me
Yeah.
out to play. And so I'd go out and play Star Trek.
Wow.
I started making up Star Trek stories to play in my backyard. Acting is
Wow.
very much that, because even though there's a script and a director and everybody's telling you you need to do this and this and this and this, as an actor, you're in your head, you're creating your backstory. You know, okay,
Yeah.
I played an FBI agent in that the following, which was Kevin Bacon's show a few years back, and I was an FBI agent, and so I'm doing all this
Wow.
stuff, but the director would be just like, okay, here's what you're doing, and so okay, I'm doing all this stuff, but in my head, I was figuring out who my character is, how long he's been on the job. There's all this stuff that
Yeah.
because because you don't want to just be, and it's the same when you write characters. You don't want characters to just be automatons, robots walking through doing walk over here, pick up this piece of paper, walk over there, set that piece of paper down.
Sure.
Anybody you want to give character. So the way people walk, the way people handle themselves is all different based on who you are, based on your experience, et cetera, et cetera. And so as an actor, you're working on that stuff in your head as well. And for me, it's like
Yeah.
it's very similar to how I create
Yeah.
characters for my books. So as a bonus, which I didn't know when I got into the acting, I actually learned things about creating characters, which
Yeah.
now helps me when I'm writing books because I now think of the characters moving and doing and why are they not just what they're doing, why are they doing it? What what drives this character?
Wow. Wow.
What yeah, those are the
Wow.
so those are things that yeah, and acting is just fun. I've gotten to do some really fun things. I've done some stuff where they put you in wacky costumes and I, you know, yeah,
Yeah.
stuff that I would never get to do in real life. I've been in,
Wow.
I got murdered by a serial killer in a movie once. We did a lot of stunts
Wow.
in one. I've been threatened. I've been beat up. I've been shot at. I've been, you you know, but
Wow.
it's fun. It's all that make believe fun. And so, yeah, had a blast doing it. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. Otto Bobby Nash, so fun, so fun, so fun. Like you're all fun. I must
Thank you.
confess. And here is the point where I like to tell you about well, every creative and every author always on this show would have a privilege to name 10 books that would probably stay with them. But in your own case, I don't know if it's going to be 10 movies, but I like to ask the movies and the books, which of them stayed with you longer?
Oh goodness. The very first book I ever read that I remember reading, I remember I mentioned my mother had the Reader's Digest.
Yeah,
The very first story I ever read that I remember reading was a book called The Snowbound Six by Richard Martin Stearns. This is the guy who wrote The Towering Inferno, the book that it was
wow,
based on. And it's a story about people trapped in a snowstorm on a mountain trying to get off the mountain and survive. It's a
wow.
wonderful like adventure
So would
story.
that go for number? Would that go for number one?
That would
Will
be
that
number
go
one.
for
Yes,
number
yeah, that's
one?
number one. That's number one.
Beautiful.
Uh,
Go
it
go
because
on.
yeah, and that one stuck with me for years. I have a great love for the outdoors and writing about the outdoors, and now I'm pretty sure that's where
Wow,
that came from.
wow.
So let's see. Wow, it's one of these things. I think about books all the time until I have to do them, and then I blank. Certainly, I used to read when I was a kid. I used to love reading Star Trek novels.
Star
Peter
Trek.
David wrote some fantastic, and he wrote one called Vendetta, which was really good. That was
Wow.
that I would highly recommend. Um, I've read a lot of comic books over the
Number
years.
two.
That's number two. Yeah. I read a lot of
Yeah.
comic books growing up. I would we'll make this number three and four. I would recommend number three, the John Byrne Fantastic Four run, which is actually like
Okay.
9 books or 2 omnibus, but those are fantastic. And I'd also highly recommend the New Teen Titans by Marv Wolfman and George Perez, which is multiple books, trade paperbacks as well. But those are two fantastic comic book series. A
Wow.
lot of um, let's see what else. There's a book.
That number four.
That's number four. Number five. There's a book called um, Sable, written by Mike Grail. Mike Grail did a comic book series called John Sable Freelance. It was really, really
Yeah.
great series in the 80s. He wrote a novel
Wow.
that adapted the first story arc, and the novel is absolutely fantastic. It's called Sable by Mike Grail. That would be number five.
Yeah. Number
Uh,
five.
yep. Number six, I'm going to say The Black Echo. Sorry, no, The Black Ice by Michael
Okay.
Connolly. That was the first Harry Bosch
Okay.
novel I ever read, and that one
Yeah.
stuck with me. That I loved it so much that I have picked up and read everything he's written.
Wow.
So that's a good one. Um, I'm thinking, I'm blanking. Encyclopedia Brown would be number six.
Number
I don't,
six. Beautiful.
yeah, I don't have one in particular that I can think of the title off the top of my head, but I used to as a kid. Scooby Doo introduced me to mysteries, the Scooby Doo cartoons, and I fell in love with mysteries. And
Wow.
I found out that there were these mysteries for kids called Encyclopedia Brown, and I devoured them out of the school library when I was a kid. Just absolute
Wow.
fantastic problem solving, detective fun. So that would be
Wow.
number is that six or seven. What are we up to? Six or
Number
seven?
six.
That was number six. Okay.
Six.
Um, okay. So that would be number six. So there's a book called Airframe by Michael Crichton, which is
Okay.
it is about a plane crash and the investigation into the plane crash. It doesn't sound like that would be overly exciting, but I was riveted by this novel. It was so good. And I just, yeah, I've read it a couple of times, and I don't usually read novels, multiple times.
Will
But
it go for number eight?
sure, yeah.
Wow. Beautiful. You have eight and just two to go.
Okay. I'm thinking. Okay, I'll give you number nine. There's a novel called Whipping Boy by John Byrne. John Byrne is a
Oh, Wimpy
writer and
Boy.
whipping boy, like getting a whipping, whipping boy. It is a
Yeah,
horror
yeah, yeah,
horror novel. John Byrne
yeah.
writes and draws comic books. That's where I knew him from. And he
Wow,
wrote a couple of novels, and they were both horror novels. The first one was pretty good. His second one, Whipping Boy, was just absolutely fantastically written and terrifying. And I
wow.
love it. It's such a great novel that
That would
I
be
would.
great. That would be great for number.
Okay, and then number 10. Um, I'll give you another one here. This one's there was a Lone Ranger novel called Vendetta that my friend Howard Hopkins wrote several years ago. That was really great. It was the first time I had read the Lone Ranger since I was a kid, and
Yeah.
he wrote an absolutely fantastic Lone Ranger story. So was that
Wow.
10? Was that 10 novels?
Wow, wow, wow. We have 10. We have 10 on the 10 books that stayed with you. That's very
Yeah.
beautiful, Naj. Well, if you are going to be streaming this particular unique episode, we've been on to author Bobby Nash. Author Bobby Nash is a self taught writer, an avid and elliptical reader. Obviously, you should have read a whole lot of books to write over 100 books. So, I must confess that if you'll be needing a great time, a great moment to have a great devouring of some of the amazing books that would stay with you, I would want you to go on Amazon and look. Also, Bobby Knight, I'm sure you would like to tell us how we can find your books, how we can get to build a rapport with you, and how we can get to have you mentor and coach us to the next big thing that we ought to be.
Sure. Well, like you said, most of my books are on Amazon around the world. Um, BobbyNash.com is my website. There's always news and information and links and write ups of everything there. Ben, dash books.com. That is my indie press for the books that I publish myself. I do a lot of crime
Yeah.
thrillers there. Um, and then, so I do a lot of events and conventions. I do conferences where you can come out and take classes. I do teach either panels or whatnot. I do a lot of online panels, kind of like what we're doing here, but there's a couple of places like Go Indie Now or Continual that do video podcasts where it's like a panel, and they'll have
Yeah.
topics and authors will come in, and like I'm doing one tomorrow on creating characters for Go Indie Now. And
Wow.
so it'll be me, like 4 or 5 other authors, and it'll be like a teaching thing where we will discuss this aspect of writing or publishing. So those are great places to check out if you're interested in hearing other how authors do things or things like that. Those are great places to visit. They each do stuff every
Wow.
week. There's always
Wow.
new content. Yeah. And like I said, I do conventions and writers conferences and library shows, library events. I do like some of the places that do like the Centers for the Art. I'm teaching a class here in Georgia later this month. I'm doing a Saturday workshop on creating comic books, things like that. So yeah, so we get out and we do those. We try to record these things when we can, so we can put them up so you can for people that can't be there can listen to them. And yeah, it's fun.
Wow.
I like sharing some of the information when I can.
Wow. Author Bobby Nash. I am so humbled, so thrilled, and privileged to have a great mind like you on our book show. So far, this global readers cycle is concerned, you're a big asset. So far, the globe reading is concerned. But before you go, Author Bobby Nash, I'd like you to leave your last words to the man who is
Oops, I'm sorry. You faded out for 1 second there. Can you say that last part one more time?
Know what next move he's going to make. To the woman, the man, I said, I'd like you to leave your last words.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry,
You
we
got,
we
Bobby
we
Nash,
we locked up
are
there
you
for
there?
a second. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry,
Yeah, I
I
can hear
missed
you.
that
Go on.
last little bit. Okay.
Well, I said for the man, the woman who is going through some stages of divorce, separation, to the downtrodden, to the man who is here to carve a niche for himself, what would be your last words to those set of folks?
Okay. I, you know, I've never been married, so I've never been through the divorce thing. But it's, I'm a firm believer that time can be your ally. Time can help you. Time,
Wow.
give things time. It's not always easy, but I think if you can wait it out doesn't sound right, but if you can get through it, a lot of times you will come out the other side better. It's not always easy. Um,
Wow.
find people in your life
Wow.
that you can talk to, that
Yeah.
understand. Having those kind of connections is very important. We all have those moments where we need something from someone, or so we need, and it could be just as simple as just let me vent, and you go, okay, and you're that, sometimes
Yeah.
we just need someone to be there,
Yeah.
and if you don't have people like that, I don't, it's a little harder, but try to find something that grounds you, find something that makes you comfortable, that makes you feel safe. For some people, that's reading. For some
Yeah.
people, that's exercise. For some
Yeah.
people, for some people, that's going to the movies by yourself. For some people, that's
Yeah.
taking long walks around your subdivision. It could be whatever can center and ground you and allow you to calm calm your spirit. If you can find those, something like that, that helps you, those things will help a lot. For me, yeah, being able to sit and read quietly, or going out and taking long walks. Those are kind of ones for that work for me. Getting out and just kind of, getting that deep breath of fresh air, taking a little walk, your troubles are staying at home while you're walking, walking around, whatever. Find something that helps center you, that helps focus you, and that will help you a lot, I think.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Otto Bobby Nash. We are so privileged and so honored to have your fine mind on the Global Readers Circle, the one student, one book, one author mantra. The Global Readers Circle, the ultimate podcast designed to use your good office and authority as an author and creative to illuminate, inspire, and motivate a committed reader out of every global person. Man, I'm so honored, so thrilled that you honored our Ivy and you were able to share depth. So humbled. Thank you very much for honoring our Ivy. We look forward to see you on our Zoom meet and greet. We look forward to see you on our webinars, and we look forward to have your fine mind and your minders on our global reader circle team globally. But for now, we would like to say thank you very much, and this brings us to the end of the show.
Thank you so much for having me. This was fun.
I look forward to have you again. I look forward to have you on a talk show or webinars and a Zoom meet and greet. And I look
Absolutely.
forward to have your fine mind on our author student tour. Well. If you're going to be streaming this, don't forget that we've been on to Bobby Nash and we've been having an amazing time with this great author of over 100 books. And don't forget that you would become the books you read and the people you meet. So whatever happens, you make sure that you written by Bobby Nash, like The Evil Ways, and also try to meet author Bobby Nash. Trust me, you will never regret it, and your life will never remain the same. He's been your host, Smart Stewart Udor, on the Global Reader Circle, and it's been author Bobby Nash all of this entire evening on the show. I've been very humbled, very true. So that you don't forget to share, follow, and don't forget to engage on our hashtag. And don't forget to tell your friends about Bobby Nash. Trust me, you will need to give his book a devouring. There will be a master prize for your success. Trust me, this would be one book that would lead you to so many reads. Bobby Nash, thank you very much for honoring the Ivy. Thank you very much. I've been humbled the entire time.
Thanks again. Yes, I have had a good time.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.